Hey y'all, Daniel Aaron here, your guide to vibrant living. And when you read the title to this, you might be thinking, well, that's an interesting metaphor, chain-smoking witches. No, I mean it literally. Here's how it happened. Many years ago, I was living in Spain. I'd been living there about a year, and I had this great fortune of living in a 400-500-year-old stone building right near the big cathedral in Santiago de Compostela. And I returned home one afternoon from an astrology reading that I was giving, and I walked into the apartment, which I shared with my friend Mark, and there was right in the entryway a little marble table with our answering machine, old school, like actually had a tape in it. So I hit it, and it's kind of my routine, come in the door, hit them, and then I hear this message. It goes, "Hola, Daniel. Ya sé, I can see. I can barely do the Spanish anymore." And the message was in this deep voice, and it said, "Daniel, I know who you are. I want you to be in Madrid tomorrow." And that was it. I hit it again. I played it again. Like, what on earth? So, and then I played it for my roommate later. No idea. So, we went on. We made a great Japanese dinner that night. So, the next day, I come downstairs from my loft where I sleep, and right then the phone rings. So, hello, and same voice, same message. I know who you are. I want you to be in Madrid tomorrow. So the first message was 2 days ago, and I'm just like frozen there. What? Thinking there's got to be more. She's gonna say more, but no. And in fact, I didn't even know if it was a she at that point. And so I said, "Pardon me." And then she said a little more. She said, "I know that you're an astrologer," and she said, "I have a Feria de Ciencias Ocultas," which I didn't quite get, but I was starting to get a picture. We have a little more of the conversation, and so I get the idea that, in fact, what she does is runs a psychic fair, and that they're going to Madrid, and she wants me to come. So she says, "Can you be in Madrid tomorrow?" And I'm like, so I say, I could be in Madrid tomorrow, but I'm not going to be. But still, I was leery. I was also intrigued. So we talk a little bit more and agree that when she finishes her next tour, 3 weeks in Madrid, that I will come to her office in Vigo, which is about an hour and a half from where I lived in Santiago, and meet her. End of the story. Like I'm thinking, we could meet and maybe talk about it, a little reasonable. So I take this, 3 weeks later, I take a bus, get to Vigo, follow her directions through the city, get to her store. And this blew me away. First of all, it was a proper New Age store like you'd see in the US, like a big thing with rainbows and crystals and unicorns and tons of books. And I must have been a little homesick because I walked in there, having already developed a New Age allergy. I walked in there and I was like, wow, this is cool. Go to the counter, ask for Lola, her name. I learned it was a her. And they say, in the back. So I go through the back, like going through restaurant doors like this. And I walk in the back. And then there's a thing that points to her office. And this was one of the weirdest parts. I kid you not. If you've ever seen the movie Being John Malkovich, how they have, in that movie, there are these ceilings that are about this tall. And as I recall, no explanation for it. Maybe it was a space-saving thing. Anyway, her office is like that. So I, knock on the door, and then she's sitting way over there, like kind of on the floor, at a floor desk sort of thing, like I would use now that I've gotten into yoga, although I like high ceilings. Anyway, so I literally have to kind of like scrunch over like this and walk to get to her desk, and then she points to the chair in front of her desk, which is a normal chair with the legs cut off. Okay. She's sitting there at her desk and say a couple of words, and she's got a ashtray like this big on her desk overflowing, and one of the first things she says to me is, "Mira," I'll just do it in English. She says, "I have discovered the secret to beauty and the fountain of youth. Pauses, clearly waiting for me to ask about it. And I'm looking at her, and I'm thinking to myself, she's not exemplifying either of those traits, beauty or youth. But you know what to do, so I say, what is it? And she looks at me and she goes, adrenalina. Adrenaline. She says, Mita. She says, I smoke 4 packs of cigarettes and drink 10 cups of coffee every day. So I said, okay. Strangest thing is we go on with the conversation, and by the end of it, I agree that I'm going to go on the next psychic fair with her. Now, like I said, I'd been in Spain for about a year already at that point. I was in a relationship with an amazing Spanish woman, and something wasn't quite flowing in my life. Like, we had a good relationship, but it wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't developing in some way, and I was starting to feel like something's not right here. And she told me how the psychic fairs work, which is that we give readings. People pay us basically $5 and they can ask a question. And she stressed, you have to be short with your answers, like 5 minutes is maximum. And so at that point in my life, my astrology sessions were like 2 hours. It would be the shortest one. So I thought, well, at the least, this is going to stretch me and shake me up a bit from my life and also from my work. You know, to do 5 minutes astrology, wow, that's impossible. All right, let's do it. So I fly to Bilbao about a week later on the western side of Spain. And I get there and, and I start to get a little nervous, like, what am I doing? I've never been here before. I don't know anything about these people. Again, I follow her directions through the city, and I get to a restaurant where her and the others are meeting that night. And the next day we start the fair. And I come in. It's kind of your typical Spanish restaurant, smoky and greasy and loud. And I come to the table, and it's a long table, and there's 9 others there. Lola at the far end, and 8 women, and then 1 guy who is interesting. He's a whole nother story I'll come back to. And when I say chain-smoking witches, like, it was unbelievable. And I was pretty hardcore about my vegetarianism in those days, and the amount of greasy carcass on that table, oh my goodness. And these women were amazing, and I came to love them. My first impression though of them was like literally be like cigarette in one hand and dripping grease flesh in the other, and like and I tried to be diplomatic. I tried not to give too much of my judgment away. I tried not to have too judgment, but I was horrified. Anyway, I made it through the meal, seriously doubting my choice to join at that point. But hey, I was already there. So the next day we started into the thing, and the way it worked is she would rent out like a space in a shopping mall and set up these cubicles. Her and her husband would drive and set up this thing, and then we would have little booths and the table and chairs and a little curtain and a sign on the front that said who we were and what we did. And at the end of the first morning, which was kind of interesting, I did a few readings, and I was like, this is weird, but I think it was actually valuable. The tall guy that I told you about at the dinner, he came up to me and he's like, hey, do you want to come with me to the vegetarian restaurant? And at that point I was like, wow. And it turned out his name is Ketan, and he became a great friend. We ate at that restaurant every day for the entire 3 weeks. He, in fact, gave me some information that changed my life and leads to some other stories for another time. And we go through the fair. It was pretty good. By the end of it, I was getting so excited, probably by the end of the second week, I was like, this is cool, this is fun, it's interesting. I was meeting people, my work was evolving rapidly. So I called up my friend Mark, who I shared the piso, the apartment with in Santiago, and I was like, hey, come visit. So he flew over, hung out for a couple days, and then I said to him, you know what? The next fair, Lola told me, is in Lisbon, Portugal, and she needs people that speak Portuguese. You speak Portuguese, why don't you join? And he's like, well, but I don't have any psychic abilities. I was like, oh, but you know, the animal cards, you do that really well, and really, you're pretty psychic, and I can teach you. And he's like, okay. So I told her about him, and he's in. So the next fair, we go to Lisbon. And for some reason, in Lisbon, we stayed in a 5-star hotel. Apparently one of Lola's previous clients owned the hotel or something. So we get there, we're in this super fancy hotel, really fun, you know, we're like rock stars. But then the fair, completely dead. Nobody showing up, day 1 and day 2. At the end of day 2, Lola says, tomorrow something's going to change. We're curious. So in fact, the next day, we come in, we're doing our work, and then a national news team in Portugal comes, and they do a 5-minute spot on the nightly news about us, including interviewing the foreigners, me and Mark. And no kidding, the next day we show up, and there is a line of like 100 people waiting for us. And from then on, the next 2.5 weeks, constant line of people. We couldn't serve everybody. It was unbelievable. And really fun, we were making what's the money in Portugal? I don't remember. We were making money hand over fist. So if we thought we were important before that, we were high rollers. Now a couple interesting things happened there. One is there was a, what do you call it, bellhop, doorman at this fancy hotel who spoke almost no English. And every day when Mark and I would walk out, he would open the door for us, and he would alternate between one of two sayings. He would say, remember my friend, I can't do the accent, but he would say, remember my friends, never walking alone. And of course what he meant is, you know, we're always together we're never alone. There's always support. We're always connected. And the other one he would say, really sweetly, is, remember my friend, never lose face. Never lose face. And of course what he meant was never lose faith. And that was, I remember that as one of the lessons for me of you just never know what a teacher will look like, who has wisdom. They may not be dressed, you know, in saffron robes. All right. Well, so we go on from Portugal to our next one in Móstoles, which was completely deserted. We had almost no business. It was horrible. We spent all the money that we made in Lisbon. Then we go to the next one in Toledo. I don't know if you know Toledo, Spain, an amazing place. Center of the Inquisition. Interesting that we were working there. Everywhere you go, there are suits of armor in shops, marzipan. And we're going through the fair there, and you know, it's going along okay, pretty well. And two important things happen there. One is Mark befriends a woman who came to his booth for a reading, and they got to talking, and they got to be friends, and she invited us to come over to her house. And her friend told us this story. We had a few dinners together with them. Told us the story of how she had gone to the psychic fair the year before, and one of the brujas, which is the term for witch, one of them told her that her husband was going to die in an auto accident. Her husband happened to be a truck driver who was out on the road more often than not. She spent an entire year in this anxiety waiting for him to die. You know, and what we know now about metaphysics, visualizing him dying, blessed be, he didn't die. And I heard this story, and I was so sad for her, and I was so upset too, because to me that is just such a misuse of power. You know, those of us that work in the esoteric arts and ways, have a responsibility. People come to us for help, for support, not for us to tell them what's going to happen. And here's one of the universal yogic lessons that I teach, that I learned from this. We never want to give our power away. And as a teacher, we never tell someone else. Now, in the end, if you look at the cosmic question of, is there fate or free will? Is it all decided, or do we actually act? Well, we may not be able to know. And we're much better off to live our lives with the belief that we actually have free will, at least to some degree, that we influence our destiny. So, I was already feeling a little not so great about some of the ways the witches work. They never would give readings for people that they knew. And so that was going on. One other piece is I'm sitting there one day, a little bit slow in business, and then up comes Regina. Regina is actually one of the only one there that wasn't Spanish. She was from Brazil and didn't speak much English. Very strange, though. Her medium was snail shells. She would take snail shells and throw them on the table, and from that she would be able to divine. Okay, so she comes to my booth and knocks on it. I'm looking at her, and I barely talked to her. I was a little freaked out by her, honestly. So she said, gestures, can she come in out there? Okay, yeah, sure, come on in. So she comes in, and I think this will be the last part of this story I tell you for now. She comes into my booth, sits down, and clearly wants me to give her a reading. And at that point, I had been playing also with using tarot cards, sometimes astrology and tarot, sometimes astrology, sometimes. So I had my cards out, and she says to me, "Hay dos hombres." Right? There are two men. Okay, and so I'm a little nervous. Like I'm not sure if I'm a real deal psychic. I've got my tools, and I know I can help people, but she, as far as I can tell, she's a real deal psychic. Like a little scary. But hey, she's there. And so I ask intuitively, I say, "So you love both of these and you need to decide between one?" She says, "Yeah." I say, "Okay." So we go through the process. She shuffles the cards. I do a little prayer so that I can be helpful. Big lesson I learned in that moment, which is I was doubting whether I was going to be able to help her. And the lesson is this: if we ever want help, we must ask. And if we ask, we will always get it. So in that moment of doubt for me, I had a little prayer and said, "Help me to help her." Like, "Lord, make me an instrument of thy will." It'll always happen. And the other is, if we are committed to helping someone, to serving them, then we can always find a way. There's always a possibility if we stay with that commitment. So, I start doing the reading for her, and it was a little goosebumpy for me what happened with it, because I go through the cards and I just start seeing, not seeing pictures, it doesn't go that way for me, but just getting information. And so then I realize, I say to her, "Is one of them really good with your kids and you love him?" She said, "Yeah." And I said, "And the other one, you have a very passionate relationship and you love him?" She says, "Yeah." So we go on a little bit, and I say, I think you know already what to say, what to do here. And she says, "Yeah." And we go on a little bit, and she says, "But the one," and I look at her, and suddenly I say, "When you make love, the hands on the clock spin around," right? I said that like that made any kind of sense, like that was even possible. I said that out loud, not a metaphor. Like when I said it and it just came to me, I said it like, that is completely real. And she looked at me like, "Yeah." And I knew, we both knew in that moment that that's exactly and literally what goes on. Okay. So then we go on with the reading, and by the time we get to the end, I don't say anything about what to do. Somehow, though, she realizes what she needs to do about it. And we finish the session, and she says thank you, and she leaves. We never spoke again after that. Literally 2 days later, my whole fate changed with the psychic fair, which probably is for another time, because I feel like this has taken a lot of your time already. I'll say this, though, about it. My time with the chain-smoking witches is one of the most important and powerful times in my life, and I have so much appreciation for all of them, and they were really sweet women. There were aspects to the way they work that I don't love and didn't appreciate, and I also know they were doing the best they can in the lineage they came up with. And for me, I'm super grateful for the experience. I grew a lot, and also I learned some things about ways that I don't want to work with people, whether that's coaching, teaching, or in doing esoteric types of sessions. Plus, of course, lots of entertainment along the way. Alright, enough said for now. Thanks for watching. I hope it's been interesting, even better if it's been useful. See you later, my friends.